Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood. I'm here to give my pitch on how to bring Alexander Isles back to play Victoria Winters. My complete pitch. So this is going to be a little bit of a long video. My idea would be to part of this, the opening of this would be to say she's been falling through time and she's come back into the future now, and well, into the present day, I should say, like 20, let's say 2020. And part of this would actually be part from Laura Parker's book. The only difference is she's not so much falling through time in Laura Parker's book, she sort of just goes through it. She comes back from the past. And you find that she's landed on a beach. She does get up and walk a little bit forward, and then she collapses, and she doesn't really know what's going on, like what the hell happened. And some beachgoers find her, and they actually do help her. And she's, waking up, and she's in a hospital, not knowing how she got there, or why she's there, or who she even is. She wouldn't even know her name was Victoria Winters. And this nurse is sitting in there with her, and the nurse is going to ask her, well, do you know who you are? And she says, no. Do you know why you're here? And she says, no. And she explains it to her that she was found dehydrated and unconscious, so people, took her, brought her here to a hospital. And she was so, they brought her to a big city hospital because she was that dehydrated and just malnourished. I mean, who wouldn't be if going through that? And so this nurse, while taking care of Victoria, knows this woman can't remember her name, and knows this woman can't, doesn't know who she is. So this nurse, as Victoria can't stay in the hospital, mind you, like forever. So this nurse does something really nice for her. She says, I'll tell you what, I will help you by, taking you home with me and letting you live with me if you get a job and stuff. You seem very nice. We can get you maybe an identification. If you want to, pick a name, you can. And the name I would give Victoria Winters would be Ellen Mustang. And why that name, I don't know. It's just the name I came up with. Because it's not Victoria Winters, it's just a name that's chosen for her. And she takes it, and by the way, a lot of this would take place in New York City. And, for the most part of this, it would be her, working this job. She would basically be working at a library. And I think that would be the best place for her, because Victoria Winters liked books, she loved to read. And she knows how to read. And that's what's weird. The nurse even says this to her, well, you know how to read, where did you learn how to read? And she's like, I don't know, I just know. She knows how to do certain things, she just doesn't remember how she learned them. And she's, what keeps getting weird is with her is she keeps getting drawn to the history section of the library, and she doesn't really know why. It's just like something's calling to her. And so she goes into the history and the history side of the library, and how there's like a history of the states and stuff, and she just grabs this book about the history of the states. And she doesn't know why. She decides to check it out from the library. And the nurse even asks her, well, why'd you check out that book? And she says, I don't know, just something told me to check it out. Now, she doesn't read this book right away, obviously. Her and the nurse, they continue to talk and stuff and be friends. And she continues to work at the library, and she's making a decent living. And she's actually, for whatever reason, they decide to go for a walk, in New York City, or not whatever reason, these two girls, they just decide to go for a walk. And what happens is, you remember the Hammond Foundling Home, obviously. Well, they walk past it. They're across the street from it. And Victoria Winters, she's looking at it, and she's just like, she's just really looking at it really hard. And the nurse who's helping her, she's like, what, you remember something? And she's like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And she goes, well, we can go in there if you want, we could have a look around, we could just explain this. And she goes, okay, why not? And they go in there, and at first she doesn't remember, anything at all, really. And there's this young, pretty girl working there, and she says, well, what's your friend's name? And she goes, well, her name's Ellen Mustang, but that's just the name we gave her. This is a girl who, was a Jane Doe in a hospital. They tell her, this girl who's running the Hammond Foundling Home, this young, pretty girl. Oh, and they're looking around, and Victoria's watching the kids and stuff play, and she's like, things start flashing back of her being a kid and like her running around, and at first she shakes it off because she's thinking, no, she's just thinking about that because of these kids. And then, but the longer she spends in there walking around, she keeps having memories that she was in the foundling home. And she just can't believe it. Like, why would she be in a foundling home? Why, right? So she walks out, not putting too much into it, but she just, it's weird for her. And then this woman gives the nurse her card. Well, if you guys ever want to come back and, visit the foundling home, you can. Or you want to adopt a kid, please let us know. And the nurse says, oh, thank you, Miss, what is it, Hopewell? And she said, yeah, that's my name right now. I'm getting married, though. And Victoria, / Ellen Mustang looks at her, and and the lady who's referring to herself as Miss Hopewell, she's like, and the Miss Hopewell lady's like, are you okay? And she's like, I'm not sure. Your name sounds so familiar to me. She goes, I'd swear I'd been here before. She goes, well, maybe you have. Maybe you were an orphan. And she goes, well, how would I be an orphan? She goes, some parents do drop their kids off here at a very young age. It's a possibility you were an orphan. And she goes, I don't suppose you could tell me the name of every orphan here. She goes, no, I really couldn't, because that's against the law. But, I'd have to know for sure you were one. I mean, if you knew your name, it would really help me. If you knew you say your name's Ellen Mustang, but that's not your real name, it's a made-up name. You'd have to know your real name. And she goes, I'm trying to remember things. She goes, is this all so fuzzy? So that exchange somewhat helps her, but it doesn't fully help her. And they go back, and they start walking back, and The nurse is like, look, that was a pretty good experience for you. She goes, I just don't really want to talk about it, because it bothers her. And they decide to go, the girls decide to go to a Yankees game, just to get their minds off of it. And they enjoy the game and they come back. And she goes, have you ever seen a baseball game that you remember? She goes, if I did, I don't remember it, obviously. And she goes, do you really think you could have been in that foundling home or maybe one like it? And she says, I don't know. She goes, I guess it's possible, and so she goes, oh, do you have to work tomorrow? And, Victoria Winter / Ellen Mustang tells her, well, yeah, I have to go back to the library tomorrow. She goes, but yeah, I gotta work tomorrow. So they're turning in for the night. Again, Ellen / Victoria isn't reading that book yet. Trust me, that's gonna have something to do with this. And she goes back to the library, and the library offers tutoring. Will they have Ellen / Victoria be a tutor? Well, do you know how to tutor? And she sort of hears that word sort of echo in her mind. She goes, is there another word for the word tutor? She goes, isn't there another word? And the one woman who asked her this says, yeah, if you go to someone's home, it's a governess. And again, it doesn't hit her all at once, but that word hits her. It's like she hears sort of Elizabeth's voice going, you're my nephew's governess. So she hears Elizabeth's voice in her head, but she doesn't know who it is, obviously. And, I know I'm going on, I'm rambling on, but again, this is a long video, and I hope you guys listen to this whole pitch. So, she starts tutoring for the library to make extra money with the library, and she's actually doing really good. She starts realizing she's able to teach math, so she realizes, I must have had a really good education, that's what makes her not believe she grew up in a foundling home, that, she had a mother and father, that her mom and dad did take care of her. But, she starts tutoring these kids, and she keeps she accidentally spills a drink on this person, and the person is this man, and he's very rude to her, and that makes her think of Roger, not knowing it's Roger. He hears, I wish you would just go home. I wish you would just leave. She hears that voice, and it's like, why am I here? She wonders, why am I hearing these voices in my head? So she doesn't know why or who these voices are. She can't identify them. Again, she has amnesia. But things are clicking in her head. They're coming to her. And, a couple months go by. She hasn't read the book yet. And she realizes it's almost overdue. It's like 2 days. So she doesn't really get to read the book, totally. And she's going to take it back. She's coming out of her and that other nurse's place, that nurse's place, who she's staying with, and she goes, why don't you just get an extension on that book? And she goes, you know what, you're right, I think I will. I think I'll just take it in and get an extension. And she goes, hey, I got something to tell you when you get back, okay? And she says, yeah, okay. So Ellen / Victoria, again, it's been 6 months. And she goes back to the library, she's on her lunch break and she just decides to open this book about the states. And this book has certain things in it with like the states' histories. Well, she gets to the state of Maine, you know, not right away, but not, she gets to the state of Maine, not right away, obviously, and she's about to read it, but she realizes her lunch breaks up, so she stops. But she puts in the extension of the book, she gets to the extension. So she's able to take the book home, and she teaches these kids, at the library, and she works there, obviously. So she goes home and she opens the book where she had it, and she sees, wealthy families of Maine in the state's book, and the name at the top says Collins family. And something, it's storming too when she's reading this. It's a very violent storm. And she sort of sees someone standing in the hallway, and here it's the nurse, but she doesn't realize that, and it makes her flashback where she saw that ghost in the hallway. And she starts screaming, and the nurse is like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? Did I scare you? I'm sorry. I thought you heard me." And she goes, "No, no, no, I'm so sorry." And she goes, "What were you doing? Sitting here like this, And the lights come back on, and she looks at the nurse glances at the book. She goes, "Oh, you were reading about the families of the states, the Collins family, huh?" She goes, "That's funny." And she goes, "Well, what's so funny about it?" She goes, "Well, it's funny that I got invited to a party by them." "Well, who are they? I mean, I know they're a rich family." She goes, "Well, that's what they are. They're a very wealthy family in Maine." She goes, "Well, why did you get invited to a party by them?" She's asking the nurse this. And she goes, "I got invited to a party because I went to school with the girl, the young Collins girl who's getting ready to get married. I went to college with her and we became really good friends. So it just so happens this girl became friends with a Collins family member. And she's getting invited there." And she goes, "Well, I want you to come with me. Why don't you come with me?" And she glances down at the name, and she's thinking about what she, you know, has been seeing and hearing. And she goes, "You know what? I think I will go with you." And she closes the book, and the nurse is like, at first the nurse doesn't like ask her anything until Victoria goes into her room, and she walks in with her, and she's like, "Is there any real reason, like, you really want to go with me?" She goes, "I don't know, I just have this weird feeling maybe I'll find an answer there." She goes, at Collinsport in Collinwood, and then boom, another thunder rolls across the sky, and she hears Maggie Evans' voice. She goes, "What do you do? Why would you come here to Collinsport?" Or she says, she hears, you know, "You're a jerk." She goes, "I think I've been there." She goes, "You think you've been to Collinsport?" "Yeah, I think I've been there. Something tells me I've been there. I don't know what. I keep hearing these weird voices, and I can't identify them." And she goes, "Okay, that's fine." She goes, we leave in 3 days. So she decides, Victoria does, she's got the next day off from the library. She decides to go to the Hammond Fowling home by herself. And she goes, and the Miss Hopewell girl is there, and she goes, "Hi there." And she sees her. She goes, "Hi." She goes, "I know you can't really say anything to me, but do you know if anybody left here, like left the foundling home when they turned 18 or something? She goes, I'm sure many did. She goes, but again, that's something I can't really tell you for sure because it wouldn't be legal of me. You know, you're not their guardian or nothing. She goes, but I could have been one of them. She goes, I understand that. And she goes, please, I'm looking for answers, you know. And this woman goes, you know what, there's something about you, I want to help you. Let me just look through here real quick. And she's looking and she's looking. And she comes across the name Victoria Winter. She goes, you know, we had a couple girls leave here when they reached the age of 20 throughout the years. She goes, some do go on to get jobs and just leave here. She goes, there's actually a good bit. I can't tell you every single name, so she goes, she goes, you're old enough to be like, she goes, you're very old. And at first Ellen Mustang slash Victoria, well, gee, thanks, you know, like sarcastically. And she goes, well, no, what I'm saying is, you know, you're old enough to maybe have lived through the 60s. And she's like, well, what does that have to do with anything? She goes, well, there was a woman that did leave here. It's marked she left here. And she never returned. And, well, what was the woman's name? And she goes, well, there was a couple. She goes, I can't give you their names, though. She goes, please, just give me one name. Any name. And she keeps looking at Victoria, and as much as she wanted to give it to her, she doesn't. She goes, I really can't. I could lose my job, and I would be not protecting somebody. That's part of my job, too. If you've actually been here, you would know this. And she's like, no, I understand. You know, so she leaves. She comes so close to maybe finding her name. So, you know, the next 2 days go by. And it's, you know, they're traveling to Collinsport. And what's weird is they actually travel by train. And they travel during the day to get to Collinsport. They catch the morning train, her and this nurse. And when they're on the platform to go, and they get on the train, and Victoria's sitting by the window, she has again another moment of like she did this before, like she feels like she did all this before. And she tells the nurse this. She goes, well, maybe you did. You know, this is a good thing. You know, you might actually remember something. And she goes, I don't know, I hope. And she goes, is any name coming to mind? Like maybe a person you knew or something? She goes, no, not really. She goes, other than the Hopo lady, that name did sound familiar. And she goes, well, I guess, she goes, I know it's a stretch, but the name Collins sounds so familiar to me. I don't know why. I think I'm just losing my mind, honestly, but... And the nurse tells her not to sell herself short. You know, maybe this could be something, maybe not, but at least you could check it out. She goes, just tell them what your name is, you know. And she goes, yeah, sure. So they go to Collinsport, and the party for this girl, you know, the bridal party isn't until nighttime. So they don't go up right away, and they're talking. And when Victoria Winters goes into the hotel / she's sort of remembering Maggie, you know, Maggie. And what would be interesting is, now Catherine Lee Scott's character wouldn't be working there. She would actually own the hotel. And she comes down from the steps because she's the new manager. And she doesn't, you know, she only sees Victoria from the back, so she doesn't recognize her. And the nurse comes up and talks to her, oh, hi. I made reservations for a hotel for 2 people, me and my friend Ellen. And she goes, yeah, okay, your room's upstairs. You can stay there if you want. She goes, yeah, we're going to stay here instead of staying at my friend's house. She goes, well, who's your friend? She goes, and finally you get the name of the new Collins. And I would have the girl Collins be Olivia Collins. And, well, I'm here for Olivia Collins' bridal shower. And Catherine Lee Scott's character Maggie obviously would be invited to it too. She goes, well, I'm actually going up there myself, maybe, probably. Um, she goes, maybe I'll see you guys. I'll see you up there. Yeah, me and my friend. She goes, your friend's really shy. She goes, well, she has amnesia. Oh, I'm sorry. Matt, what's it? Catherine Lee Scott does not see her face, so that's sort of like a tease between them. And finally, it's nighttime and they're going up there. They drive up there, they rent a car. And as they're driving up there, she goes, I know you've heard me say this before, but it really feels like I've gone up to this place before, especially the way we're driving up this big, like this winding road. And she goes, well, time will tell. And finally they pull in and they knock on a door. Olivia opens the door. You see Olivia Collins hug the nurse, and she goes, well, who's your friend? Well, this is my friend Ellen. And, Ellen / Victoria shakes her hand. Olivia is the daughter or the granddaughter or whoever of David, and David is still alive. Now, you see, like, the men haven't all left the house, and David's really the only really, like, one of the men there. Carolyn's in the drawing room, so she doesn't come out and greet them right away. David comes down the steps, and he stops, and he recognizes her right away. He's like, oh my God. And at first the nurse thinks she's reacting. Why are you reacting that way to me? You've seen me before. No, oh my God, not you. Miss Winters. And she's like, and Ellen / Victoria looks at him like, beg your pardon? Miss Winters. And he comes off the steps and he hugs her. And she's like, sort of weird embracing him back. Like, she's like, I'm sorry, do I know you? And he's like, don't you remember me? It's David. David. And he's so happy to see her. They thought this girl was dead. And he's like, what brings you back? Like, he's not, he's so happy to see her. And she's like, or, whatever you want her to be, dad or granddad. And she's like, do you know this girl? I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, this used to be my governess. She was like one of the family. And she's like, and she's like, I used to come here. Yeah, you used to come here. She goes, you called me Winters. Yeah, that's your name, Victoria Winters. And it goes, you don't remember? And the nurse says, well, she has amnesia. People found her on a beach. And he's like, oh my gosh, And then Carolyn comes up. Oh my God, Vicky. They're all reacting to her. And it's they're all excited. And then Victoria looks right at the portrait of Barnabas. And she's like, I know that face. And she's like, and Carolyn's like, yeah, that's Barnabas. He lives at the old house. And then boom, she collapses. She passes out from the shock of it all. That's my full pitch for right now, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, comment, subscribe. I love Dark Shadows, man. Let me know what you guys think of my pitch.